The Mediterranean is one of the world's most strategic seas. Ringed by 3 continents, it sits at the center point between the Indian, Arctic, and Atlantic Oceans, interconnecting global trade routes between Africa, America, Asia, and Europe. The Mediterranean is now seeing a resurgence in conflicts and tensions over its waters. The shift of America's foreign policy to the Indo-Pacific and China, the increasing tension between Greece and Turkey, the expansion of the Dubai and Ankara political influence over the Middle East and North Africa, and the increasing interests of Russia and China in the region are all determining factors in the degradation of the Mediterranean security environment. As we will see later in the video, these factors have focused on one country, Libya, which perhaps provides the best example in analyzing the Mediterranean importance. So why is this sea so important? Though the Mediterranean plays a huge role for its littoral states' economies, thanks to its fisheries, tourism, and desalinated freshwater, 2 main reasons scale its importance to that of a major strategic area: energy reserves and trade. First, massive gas and oil fields have recently been discovered off the coasts of Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, Lebanon, and Palestine. These have been established by the United States Geological Survey in 879 million barrels of oil and 286.2 trillion cubic feet of gas. By comparison, the Gulf of Mexico reserves are surmised to be 3.44 billion barrels of oil and 5.7 trillion cubic feet of gas. This has led to the heightening of tensions, leading up to diplomatic skirmishes over the redefinition of exclusive economic zone boundaries. Second, more than 12% of global trade flows through these waters and is estimated at around 1.9 trillion US dollars. For the majority of cases, this trade starts in Asia and the Middle East, the world's major manufacturing and oil powers, with destinations on the US East Coast and Europe. In 2021, 9% of the US total oil imports came from the Middle East via the Mediterranean Passage. The same goes for Europe too, which imports about 18% of its oil from the Middle Eastern and North African regions. In 2020, the US East Coast received about 36.3% of containers from Asia. One major threat hangs over this immense traffic: a blockade of the Mediterranean route. The Mediterranean Sea is, to Europe, what the Gulf of Mexico is to the United States, and the South China Sea is for China. About 1.5 times the size of the Gulf of Mexico, and around 1/3 smaller than the South China Sea, the common characteristic that the Mediterranean Sea shares with these 2 bodies of water are that the access points are also choke points. If America's underbelly is menaced by the 2 straits created in Cuba, and China's main southern ports of Hong Kong and Shenzhen are bottlenecked by the Taiwan Strait in the north and the Bashi Channel in the west, and the Indonesian Straits in the east, the Mediterranean boasts for a far larger number of external and internal choke points. The main getaways into the sea are the Gibraltar Strait and the Suez Canal, through which passes all of the in- and outbound sea trade. Internally, the Turkish and Greek Straits in the east and the Messina and Sicily Straits in the west further limit the internal navigation. In total, the Indo-Arctic Atlantic trade routes rely on 4 major choke points: Bab el-Mandeb, Suez, Sicily, and Gibraltar. These 4 passages are like cogs in the world trade machine. If one stops spinning, the whole is blocked. This is pretty much what happened in March 2021, when the container ship Ever Given clogged the Suez Canal for weeks, causing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of delays. For Europe and America, it is not only critical to keep this flow of oil and goods open, but it is also essential to guarantee unencumbered navigation to their military vessels as well. European countries like France and the UK still hold a permanent naval presence in their overseas territories in the Indo-Pacific region, and temporary assignments in FONOP and anti-piracy missions have recently been increased, seeing the presence in the past few years of Britain's new carrier strike group, France's amphibious strike group, and even of a German frigate. The US Navy also heavily relies on Mediterranean chokepoints to connect its 6th and 5th Fleet's main home ports. Around 35 to 45 Navy ships traverse these passages as they move from their Atlantic bases to be deployed in the Indo-Pacific region or the Middle East. A major historical example of the importance of these access points is presented by the refusal of the British Authority to open the Suez Canal to the Tsar Baltic Fleet sailing against Japan in 1905. After months of sailing around the treacherous African route, now those ships lay in sparse on the sea floor of the Tsushima Strait. Since Washington, Paris, and London all have high stakes in the region, they also hold a tight watch over these strategic points. As a matter of fact, all 4 of these main choke points are less than 100 miles from these countries' military bases. The Mediterranean is a NATO sea. Of the 21 littoral states, 1/3 are NATO members, among which France is a nuclear power, and Turkey has the 2nd largest military behind the US. Non-littoral states also possess a strong footprint in the area. The most influential by far is the US, running military bases throughout Italy, Spain, Greece, Turkey, and Israel. America maintains a strong clutch over the region. And this has become increasingly relevant in Washington's Russian containment strategy. In fact, Moscow has been present for over a decade in the Mediterranean via a single naval base in Tartus, Syria. From Russia's perspective, this base allows Moscow to diminish NATO pressure from its southern flank in the Black Sea by adding a deterrence capability directly in the Mediterranean region. Another US strategic competitor has shown interest in the region. China has also put the Mediterranean high up on its strategic interests. Beijing's main foreign policy project, the Belt and Road Initiative, aims at boosting the commerce between China and Europe, and state-owned companies like Costco have been heavily investing in this region, like in the Piraeus port in Greece. Located at the south end of the Mediterranean is a country that has been a fulcrum of all these foreign influences. Natural resources that attract NATO members, a strategic gateway connecting sub-Saharan countries with the Mediterranean, a battleground for regional clout. Libya is a mirror and a canvas for the power struggle happening in the Mediterranean. Libya is a country split in half after the ousting of Muammar Gaddafi in 2021, with clusters focused around the main cities of Tripoli in the west and Tobruk and Benghazi in the east. In Tripoli resides the UN-brokered government, called the Government of National Accord, mainly supported by Turkey, Qatar, and Italy. On the other side of the Sirte Gulf, instead, sits Tobruk, which plays host to the Tobruk Parliament and the Libyan National Army. The main backers of this side are the United Arab Emirates, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Russia, France, and Sudan. There are 3 main dimensions that give us a better understanding of the conflict and of the Mediterranean region's importance. These are energy security, Libya's strategic location, and immigration. Energy is perhaps the most important driver of this conflict. Libya alone holds around 3% of the world and 39% of Africa's reserves. These natural resources attract first and foremost the NATO members of Turkey, France, and Italy. Turkey needs to secure its energy security to fuel its economy and 84 million citizens, and, most importantly, to propel the expansion of its political influence in the region amid its reliance on one of its main regional competitors, Russia. Despite having downed a Russian jet in 2015, Ankara still imports from Moscow around 17% of its oil and 45% of natural gas. Libya's oil could drastically help propel Ankara's Blue Homeland doctrine of establishing its military and political superiority in the region against Moscow and Dubai, while providing a diplomatic and economic angle against Italy and France's reliance on Libyan oil, which, in 2020, imported around 18.4% and 9.9% respectively. This antagonism also extends over the gas and oil fields found in the eastern Mediterranean. In 2019, Turkey signed an MOU with Libya regarding the definition of their respective EEZ, unilaterally claiming 16 nautical mile wide corridor across the Mediterranean and large swaths of these gas fields in the process. This situation not only elicited the worsening of Greco-Turkish relations, but also renewed a military interest of France and Italy, which led to the deployment of 2 frigates in the region in defense of their national oil companies' assets. One common factor among these countries is that they all heavily depend on Russian oil. France imports 8.8%, Italy 10.1%, and Turkey 17%. This reliance partially explains Russian interest in Libya, which culminated with the sending of weaponry and contractors. From a Russian perspective, control over Libya allows for 2 main achievements. First, better control over gas supplies towards France, Italy, and Turkey, in particular amid the 2022 Russian oil ban following the Ukraine invasion. Second, in a similar fashion to Syria, permit an extended Russian naval outpost in the Mediterranean. This augments Russian strategic deterrence by posing a new threat to NATO and Europe's southern flank, and offers its navy more operational freedom, partially unfettered from the Turkish Straits. For France, instead, bringing Libya under control boosts its influence in the Fezzan and Sahel regions. In 1987, this is where the so-called Toyota War between Chad and Libya took place. At the center of the conflict were the uranium mines in northern Chad, which at the time fueled both parts of France's nuclear power plants and Gaddafi's dreams of a nuclear arsenal. A wave of terrorist attacks on France's soil and against French company assets has made Paris more active in the Saharan and sub-Saharan regions in anti-terrorism operations. The UAE, in a similar fashion to Turkey, is trying to expand its political influence in the region. Its oil economy has turned the Emirates into a main regional player, with the second highest military spending in the Middle East after Saudi Arabia. Consequently, Dubai seems poised to expand its clout against opposing political movements stemming from the 2011 Arab Spring revolutions, like the Muslim Brotherhood, favorably viewed by Qatar and Turkey. Thus, Dubai aims to avoid the establishment of unfavorable powers and encourage its control over the region's weaker states, like Libya, but also Yemen, and in some regards, Egypt. Libya is also essential in regulating the immigration flow from sub-Saharan Africa into Europe. It has been seen that around 70% of sub-Saharan migrants pass through Libya on their journey to Europe. As demonstrated by the 2015 migrant crisis, migration flows can be used to threaten and manipulate European politics. As shown by Turkey in 2015 and Libya under Gaddafi, these migration flows can be exploited as a negotiated card against the EU. Both countries obtained massive cash inflows to halt migrants with their borders. As such, Libya can become the plug hindering this flow, or conversely, can become the stepping stone, fostering inter-Mediterranean migration. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. Otherwise, the thumbs down button seems to work fine too. Thanks for watching, and see you at the next video.